Welcome back to Gilmour Racing as we get ready for the 2023 Australian Formula Open Championship. Now this car, as it sits, is the winner of the last ever Australian Formula 3 Championship. 2022 Championship won by Noah Sands, who will be the last driver ever to be the Australian Formula 3 Drivers' Champion. For various reasons, including politics, it will now be Australian Formula Open, which is an exciting turn for us. We're now going to combine essentially all the open wheel categories into a super class, into hopefully some of the best racing you'll ever see, definitely the best open wheel race you'll ever see. There'll be fast cars, there'll be slow cars, there'll be newer cars, there'll be older cars, there should be everything. The racing should be sensational and the fields are amazing, as seen in our last race at Phillip Island. We had near on 30 cars on the track and it was by far the best thing we've ever seen. It was absolutely amazing. In the off season, our friends at the Resin Flooring Group have managed to revamp the floor here in the workshop. This floor was thoroughly worn out. It's had 20 plus years of traffic on it. It gets the truck parked on it every afternoon and it cops a really hard time. And these guys have come in and done a sensational job. They've leveled the floor back out and they've put this fantastic epoxy on it. It looks absolutely amazing. Not only that, it's hard wearing and should outlast us. It's certainly an asset and we're eternally grateful to these guys for helping us out and coming on board for 2023 year to help us out with the Gilmour Racing crew. We're not quite done yet, but we're almost ready to start preparation on the tub. But what we have found is a couple little issues. We suspected one of them. This thing has obviously got a blown head gasket in cylinder number one, and we picked up on this in the last race meeting. It was starting to get really difficult to start. And Gary and myself know the telltale signs, and these are generally a trouble-free engine. This is at the end of its service life. They're only good for about 3,500 kilometres. But because they run such high compression, they are susceptible to blown head gaskets, and it does happen. We've got an engine kicking around here that had only done maybe 800 kilometres and has had a head gasket failure. So this thing is coming apart anyway. It's no longer going in the car, so it's not a concern, but I'm glad that we found the problem. It can often be something else, but more than likely it's a head gasket, so it's good to know. But another problem we've found that we really didn't expect was a clutch failure. The clutch disc has actually come apart, and this has gone through everything. It's flown around through the bell housing, it's damaged the clutch basket. And for those of you that have been watching will know that that's a relatively brand new clutch. It's done very little work indeed, and it's a failure. It's nothing the driver could have done would cause that. And instead of being serviceable now, it's basically destroyed. It's damaged the clutch basket, it's full of cracks. It's ripped the heads off the nuts, and luckily it hasn't damaged the speed sensor in the back of the engine. Normally if we had a failure like that, the engine would stop, it would rip the back of the engine apart, rip the wiring harness for the speed sensor apart, and the engine would just stop. But also for those of you that have been watching will know that we've had a broken exhaust tube in that last race meeting, which is quite uncommon. But that clutch failure would justify the broken exhaust. It would put harmonics through the back of the engine in particular, and that longer tube on cylinder 4 would be the first one to crack, and that's exactly what it's done. So we haven't picked that up in general maintenance because it's still operated okay. There was nothing visibly wrong. Nobody's complained about vibrations in the car or any weird noises, but that clutch is let go, unbalancing the engine assembly, putting harmonics through the exhaust, causing the exhaust tubes to crack. With all of the body panels removed, we're left with the monocoque or the tub. And this is a safety cell which the driver sits in. It's the structural part of the car, and essentially everything bolts to it. This is quite thick carbon fiber construction, honeycomb. It's got ridges in the front, but it's light. It's one person could lift this. It's not heavy at all, even with the front suspension still on it. With the floor sections and radiators removed, you can see the shape of the tub underneath a little bit better. All these panels come off generally in sections. There's no one large panel. So if we need to replace a section of the floor, we can replace the damaged section instead of having to replace the entire floor itself. So the floors come apart in sections, then it's got the wood underneath the floor. And as we've covered, the wood's a consumable. It's like brake pads. It's there to be used. You throw it away and get another one when you need it. With the engine off, we can access the fuel tank. At the back of the bulkhead here, it's an access panel for the fuel tank. We can also get to the fuel pumps. They all drop in the top where the filler is. Quite easy to do. You can actually do it with the engine in, but it's more of a fixes fails thing. We don't normally pull the fuel pumps out unless we have to. It is a bit of a messy job. Quick couples on the fuel lines. There's also quick couples on the brake and clutch hoses just to make life a little bit easier. You can see the large wiring harnesses. A lot of time goes into inspecting the wiring harness. It's a really tough environment for anything electrical. We do carry a car wiring harness with us just in case we need it, because you will occasionally damage one, or you'll end up with an intermittent fault that you can't find, and often it's just easier to replace the harness as a total thing. The engine, you can probably see it a little bit better now that it's out of the car. This is based on a road car engine, which it had to be for this year of Formula 3 car. But you can see it's really fit for purpose. The top cast aluminium section, what should be the cam box, is now the top engine mount. The dry sump at the bottom was also a structural member of the car. It needs to carry the weight of the gearbox and needs to be as rigid as possible. Now keep in mind, the studs hanging out of the back of these tubs are a shear stud. In the event of a large accident, the engine and gearbox assembly should break away from the car. The fuel couplers, the quick couplers will engage, so it should be a dry brake for the engine to move away. And if you assume this is a big accident, the back half of the car's on fire. So if you can get that away from the driver, that's a great thing. You also reduce the inertia of the tub which the driver's sitting in. That's the majority of the weight at the back of the car, remember? The actual part that the driver's sitting in is quite light. So if you can remove the bulk of that weight, any damage done to the driver should be a whole lot less. Now that we've got the majority of the parts off the tub, it's really about cleaning and inspecting, making sure we don't have any damage we don't know about. We need to fix everything now before this gets repainted. We've pulled all the stickers off, and that always reveals a whole lot of stone damage. especially on the front of the car. If this thing cops a stone in the front, it's going to be at over 200 kilometers an hour. And on the thinner panels, it actually pushes the panel in, damaging the carbon work under the paint. So we really need to get as much paint off this thing as we possibly can to make sure we've got all the repairs done before it gets repainted. While that's away getting painted, we've got the components off the car. We've got the rear ends off the car, the front suspensions off the car, and we can get into those. We can get the wheel bearings done, the gearbox serviced. We need to service the drive shafts and a few other bits and pieces. But that is it for this episode. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. See you on the next episode.